Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, the president of Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training Japan, and my special guest today is an old friend of mine, Ted Katagi, who is the president of Kenja. Ted, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you,
So
Greg.
tell us a little bit about Kenja and tell me, how is it that you started this company, you're running this company in Japan. How did you sort of get to this point in your career? Give us a bit of the backstory.
Sure. So Kenja is an enterprise software platform. We have companies like the largest recruiting companies, Telecom, financial institutions, investment banks. And it was founded with the purpose of doing it for larger corporates, because my background is corporates. So I always tell people advice that if you do a startup, you are the customer. That's the best way to be successful. The only issue, of course, as you know, that enterprise is very, very hard to get into, especially if you're talking something so trusted like software. So it took us a few years to get there. In fact, it's been 11 years that we've been in Kenja right now. I founded it 11 years ago.
Oh, congratulations. So
yes,
how did you get to Japan? What's the backstory there?
So I actually have Japanese parents, and the kind of crime, I will say, and I still argue with my mother today about this, is that she only spoke English with me because they wanted to speak. They were from Japan, first generation over to U.S.
In the U.S.
And they wanted to learn how to speak English, so they thought that speaking English with their kids would be a great thing. So I didn't really, I wasn't pushed into doing Japanese. Kind of, one of those.
No Sunday Japan school?
I didn't do that. And it's one of those things where I had scot-free on Sunday, but boy, do I wish I had that, right? So I come over and I got a degree in computer science and econ from Berkeley. Then I went to IBM, which is, you remember the In Search of Excellence days? That was the company to work for. Went to Harvard Business School, and then right after that, Bain and Company, right? And then, management consulting is a certain thing, but I think for me, it was like I really want to go and do stuff instead of just advise on stuff. And there was a company called AirTouch. It was a spinoff of Pactel, and they had cellular operations in Japan. And after a couple of years there, they're like, "Hey, Ted, you're Japanese, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm Japanese. Everything I know about me is Japanese, right? My parents are Japanese." And they said, "Okay, we're sending you to Japan."
They didn't do a Japanese N1 style
no,
language test on you.
They didn't.
Ted, just read us the Nikkei Shimbun.
No, I would have failed miserably. I had 1 year of Japanese in college.
Did you?
And you know what that means. It's kind of like I can do the hiragana, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I get over here and I'm thinking I'm Japanese because, I come over and my cousins are they always accept me as family and everything, the cousins in Japan. And then no one thinks I'm Japanese. And that was a big shock. And then there's a few years of trying to figure this out, like what's going on. Now I speak Japanese okay. I think it's probably horribly if the Japanese are listening to this, but good enough to just get by, right? But at the time, I didn't speak a single word.
Because you look 100% Japanese.
Right.
You could have grown up here. You could have been educated in the States. That's why your English is so good. So as a Japanese, I would expect all the cultural norms to be correct. You understand everything that's going on in the language, using keigo, polite language at an ultra stratospheric level.
But the weird thing about this is that, the Kikoku Shijo, the people who are returnees, right?
Yeah.
Even these guys will say that at some point they'll be outed as not 100% Japanese because there's something about it like, oh, you didn't go to college in Japan because you don't know about the Japanese history or this or that. So for me, sometimes it's like I always learn to say, oh, I was raised, in Japanese, I'll say I was raised in Japan. I'm raised in America.
States,
and I have to say that because sometimes they'll say, oh, wait, you're not Japanese. After a minute of talking to them, I'm like, I never said I was. I looked the part, right? But anyway, so that was. So actually, I was speaking to the organizer of TEDx, and he said, that sounds like a great thing. It's like
you're talking about Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick, right? Yeah, and he said, Patrick Newell, and he said, Ted, why don't you speak about that? And I said, oh yeah, I've kind of figured out a framework for Japanese, and he said, we can't have a non-Japanese speak about Japanese culture to Japanese. So why don't you call it identity crisis?
Right.
So it wasn't really quite an identity crisis, but I suppose it was a shock of sorts. So I did think about this, and I think it's relevant for the listeners today about the framework. I actually, about the same time I started Kenja, I became a professor of MBA school. Right? So, and I teach this in my classes too.
Good.
I just taught a leadership class. I just finished that, so
good.
I'll bring back some of those lessons too.
Excellent, excellent.
But the Japanese framework is basically, if you think about it, Japanese is originally an agrarian society, as with all countries, agrarian, right? But the difference in Japan, it was much more village-focused farming. Collective farming, and it lasts much longer, right? So I call that no-ko minzoku. I like to use the Japanese words that actually mean something more in Japanese, right? So it's this whole thing about the collective means that if you do something wrong, murahachibu means you're kicked out of the village. Or
which is actually a death sentence, because you need the collective to harvest the rice, to plant the rice, to support each other. So
absolutely right.
Play ball with the village here, or that's it. Big trouble, right?
Yeah. Or the nail that sticks out gets hammered out, right? So all that kind of stuff, right? It's conservative too, right? As you can imagine. And then the Meiji era came in, and they brought Bushido and a lot of the other things of the nobility kind of came in. And it was reinforced after the war because the management style of Japan, basically a lot of it came from the military, because the military leaders
as it did in America.
As in America, everywhere.
All the returning soldiers,
because everybody
officers,
was in the war, right?
So you're an officer in the military, you can be the leader. You know?
That's right. It's not a
similar thing, right?
Similar thing, right? Yeah. But Bushido is particularly Japan, and Bushido brought with it 3 values that I think are important. One is the notion of kanpeki, means perfect.
Perfection.
And this is where Japan is quite different. Germans are very, they'll try to do things very exceptionally precise, but no one will do it like the Japanese. The Japanese are very, very exceptionally perfect,
and
right?
Japan is really good on detailed, small.
Yes.
Like my wife is constantly frustrated with me because I'm a big picture Aussie, chilled out sort of dude. And she's this komakai Japanese, like it's got to be done like this, and it's got to be perfect, and you know, it's always exciting at home when these cultures mix.
Yeah. So it's kind of trying to explain the unwritten rules behind the rules in Japan. So kanpeki and soncho, which is respect, is the bushido, right? Perfect respect is what I think of as the samurai, right? They're, I pay respect, and if I did something dishonorable for my family, I have to pay the ultimate price. There's that, and then there's wa, so harmony, right? So the reason why I started thinking about this more is that you can explain a lot of things that are uniquely Japanese. So, for example, the tea ceremony, right? Ochakai is, you can say it's perfect harmony, right? Or you can think of tatamai and honne. That's another great concept.
So tatamai being the superficial reality and honne being the actual reality.
Now, if you want to do perfect harmony, how are you going to do that? Because Greg, I don't like your pocket square there, right? And if I said that, that disrupts the harmony, right? So I can't say what I really think. That's the honne. So I have to tell you the tatamai. So they developed a system of like being able to say, okay, this is what we should politely say, and then this is how you get to the honne.
Well, we have that too in the West. I mean, if you imagine, I'll make this up, but imagine your auntie was having a bit of a weight control problem.
Yes.
And she's been on some fancy diet, but it's actually making no difference at all. And auntie says to you, Greg, do you think I'm looking a little bit slimmer? The honne would be, auntie, you are still the same size and as before, and I see absolutely no change in you. But the tatamai would, yes, you're looking lovely.
That's right.
So we have that.
We have that too.
Same
to a
thing,
degree,
but I think Japan just takes it to an ultimate level, don't they?
Because it's perfection, right? They try to get to the next level up. So in Japan, it's not, the chuta hampa, or the kekkoyoshi. Kekkoyoshi is good results, but without the good practice.
Yeah, well, so chuta hampa is sort of doing it half baked.
Half baked. Exactly.
I was going to say another half word, but half baked is a better word, right?
Right. So that's kind of very much the anathema to Japan. They want to do things perfectly, as nicely as possible. So, and this is why we all love living in Japan. It's lovely. Its service is very good.
So kanpeki, soncho, and wa, harmony.
Yeah, on top of the no-ko minzoku, right? And so if we think about those 4, right, then in the center of everything is rules. So if you play by the rules, are you showing others respect, and it's harmony, and you're trying to do it as perfectly, because the rule, it's possible to do something perfectly, right? Because this is the rule. Right?
And also, you'd have to take accountability for any flexibility because you're following the rule.
Right.
I went to a restaurant recently. I was meeting a mate there to have dinner. I arrived a bit early, and he said, "Look, we'll meet there. We'll have a drink in the bar and maybe have some dinner, right?" So I get there about 15 minutes early. From 5:30 is the start. So the young lady says, "Come back in 15 minutes." No flexibility. Like, she didn't say, "Oh, great, come in, have a drink. Like, let's make some money here for the bar." You know, he's arrived early. The bar's empty. No problem. We'll get him a drink. We'll start making some money here. Let's go for it. No. 5:30. You come back at 5:30. Disappear for 15 minutes. Come back. Following the rules. Perfect rule following. But, you know, hello, you're trying to make money here. We just come out of 3 years of COVID. You take my money type of thing. So I often find that contradiction of the rule provides accountability, but it's also takes you away from having to think and
true
having to make a decision yourself and actually have a little bit of, you know, commercial sense about, you know, what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress, but please keep going.
Well, yeah. So those four are the basic principles, and then I was speaking to a lot of other leaders, like Kita-san at EY actually was the one who told me this. Is he said, basically, you have to think about in Japan. There's the exceptions. So when the rules don't make sense, so there's context is the other, the fifth element, if you will. So I like that one. Is that everything is right until it's not, and then because the rules for acting in Japan with Japanese will be different than the rules acting abroad with foreigners, right? And then that's accepted and understood. So that's probably the trickiest part because sometimes it seems like it's arbitrary.
Ted, do you get to break the rules? Because, you know, as you said, you're American, raised in that country, educated in that country, you know, schools, university, MBA, the whole works. And you tell them, I'm raised in the States. So does that allow you to break the rules? Or do they look at you and go, well, don't tell us about your raised in the States there, Ted. You're Japanese. You've got to fit in like the rest of us and follow the rules.
No, I'm not. And so this is a struggle for, I think, the more of the returnees because their Japanese is good enough that they could be accepted. And a lot of them will push the extra edge and do that. My Japanese is bad enough that I won't be accepted. So no, it's true. It's like
so in actual you get the Gaijin card. You get the Gaijin card in a way, right?
I think in Japan though, I think the interesting thing is that it's part of the wa and being accepted in the group. I won't push it so far that I'm cast out, but I will push it far enough that we can try to get things done.
Get a deal done here, right?
Or something. So
good on you.
So
well
that's a little bit of that framework. I think most people say, well, that makes sense. And then you can explain so many of those things of Japanese culture in one of those five.
No, I think that's a good framework. And so, you know, when did you first get back here? You mentioned you joined IBM. Did you come here with IBM or AirTouch?
No. It was AirTouch,
It was AirTouch, right? Yeah. So AirTouch says, okay, you're Japanese.
Yeah.
Well, you look Japanese.
Yeah.
Should be no problem. Away you go.
Right.
So you get here and then you start working for AirTouch. And then how long are you with AirTouch here? And what are you doing for AirTouch at that time?
Well, AirTouch was about 16 years in total. I started out as a bucho, which is a fairly decent. I remember, like, do you want to have a bucho or an auditor? And I asked my friends, like, no, it wasn't an auditor, it was an advisor.
Oh,
an advisor, I thought was like, then like, no, don't be the auditor,
take the bucho,
right?
Take the bucho every time over the advisor. Yeah,
I did that, and then they made me a board member actually when I was 33, and that was the subject of a Harvard Business School case study. It was taught for all first years for like 8 years.
You've got a Harvard case study on your career.
Yeah.
Gee.
Yeah.
We're with VIPs here today, folks. We got royalty in the house. First Harvard case study ever to be on the show.
Well, but it was interesting because what it was is a turnaround of Kansai Digital Phone.
I see.
And it was, I can say this now because this is many years later, but at the time, they were bleeding cash because their churn rate was 4%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but
churn
4%
rate of
a
clients,
month.
Of customers.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So that means half your customers are going out and your acquisition costs are high. So it means that you're losing money hand over fist. By getting more customers, you're actually losing more money.
Yeah.
Right. So we actually had to look at the
no one got the abacus out and did a few calculations on what's going wrong here.
No, because this is the time when we had free phones and no contracts.
Yeah.
So that was the thing. And then, this is one of the things about the Japanese joshiki, the common sense, they'll say, oh no, in Japan we don't have contracts. And of course now they have contracts.
Contracts are
everywhere, right? But at the time we're like, no, this is the way we should sell it.
And so that when you first, how old were you when you became a bucho?
I was 31.
It's fresh off the banana boat to Japan. Two choices. We can make up the common advisor card here or the bucho card. I'll take the bucho card. Great, you're in charge. Take care of that team.
Well,
so that must be interesting.
Well, no, that one was still, I was a bucho, but then it was kind of like a bucho to the side.
Oh, okay. So no actual team.
No.
You're a player, but you got
a couple
title.
Years, and then I do the thing, and I try to get along. But after I did well enough, they said, "Okay, here's your board assignment," and I had a team.
And how many people did they give you?
It was about 12 people. It wasn't a lot. No, it's very small. But here's the thing.
Not bad for first up.
Here's the thing. I didn't figure this out. So I teach the case as a professor now.
Okay.
So I'm one of the few professors that teach their own case.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
And this kind of came up. And this is the great thing about case studies is that you actually learn as the professor as well. Like, and even though I'm the protagonist in the case, I'm talking them through this. One of the students said, "Well, how is it that they gave you power? Because all these older executives, they had all the stuff." And I had to think about it for a second.
Yeah, why did they give me the
right? Well, they gave me all the responsibility.
Why did they do that?
Because the company's doing poorly. So if it goes under, they'll say, "Well, that young kid,
that Ted screwed it up."
Thing. But if it did well, and this happened, I got a promotion out after 2 years. We went from number 4 to number 2 in our market. And as a result, I got promoted out. But they told the next guy, they said, "You're not going to do anything, okay? You're not going to be like this Ted guy. Okay. You're just going to do your thing." Because once it was working well enough, they...
So in terms of, you've been leading people in the States before you got to Japan.
Yeah.
And okay, so now you're finally doing well and they say, okay, here's your 12 people, run the department. What were some of the challenges? What were some of the differences you found of, running a Japanese team compared to running something in the States?
The case study was about that too, actually.
Okay.
Right, because they clearly said, well, Ted was the gaijin, and they used those, But so I think that one of the differences is that in Japan, people, I think they have a different sense of responsibility. I remember one of the things I did to motivate people in the States is like, "Hey, you're in charge. I'll make you responsible for this."
We're both laughing because we know exactly. The Japanese team's going, "What?
Oh my God.
What?
I'm going to go the other way, right?
I wanted less responsibility,
right,
accountability. Ted, what are you talking about?
Right. So I think in Japan, one of the things is I think establishing a vision is good, but it's much more about really blocking and tackling and showing the way, right? So it's not just saying, "Okay, here's some concept." We're going to actually go through and do all the blocking and tackling.
Now, on that point, though, would a Japanese bucho do the blocking and tackling, or would a Japanese bucho, do you think? Yeah.
No, normally not.
I'm wondering about that. Wouldn't they approach it in a different way?
Well,
Hidarite Uchiwa type of, the left hand with the fan type of thing,
The issue, I think, is that a lot of the enlightened leaders will say, "I'm going to let my, my people, they're going to lead, and I'll liberate them, right? And go ahead and do whatever you want." The issue is that
I'll be a servant leader.
Yeah,
I'll be
servant leader
behind you.
But the staff on the bottom, the young people will eat that up. They don't know better. What will happen is the middle management will block it in every way possible because they're not into change. And so if you do that approach, you just say, "Go and create." You actually, in my mind, in Japan, you need more of a leader in the intermediate stage before you get to a stage where people are enlightened and doing their own thing. You need a stage where you're actually kind of disrupting that middle.
So that's that Horenso thing, right, about Hokoku, Renraku, Sodan. So for young people, report, contact,
right,
and consult.
Right.
So you're not isolated to take a decision which potentially could be the wrong one, screw things up. You're got some sort of component there. You can check back with your boss, "Hey, listen, boss, I want to do this. Is that okay?" To protect you from making mistakes, that kampeki, that perfection thing, right? So we don't want to have perfection here. We don't have mistakes. But, in your sense, though, you're initially thinking, well, go forth, my children, and flourish, And they're like, whoa, no. So you were trying to find out a means to give them, what are you saying? Give them some freedom, but give them some protection around guidance. So how did you get the balance there?
But give them freedom, but you actually have to roll up your sleeves and help
yourself.
Do the work. Myself, and I brought over 2 others from the States.
So a Japanese bucho, what would they do?
The Japanese bucho, I think, would in one way, in a good sense, is like, I'll leave it up to you. You try to do the stuff and encourage the person. But like I said, sometimes there's the whole wall of resistance. And so unless you go in there and you're able to just get in enough details, like, for example, when I was talking about the contracts, we didn't do a contract, but we did a 1-year plan where you would get the discount after 1 year. So it's simulated.
It's like a contract.
It's like but it's a positive contract. But the interesting thing is you had to pay 2,000 yen up front. And the whole big aha of that case, the reason why I'm going into this a little bit, is that little thing is what attracts the loyal customer to come to us. So there is a loyal customer. So basically we had a whole influx of low churning customers coming into the concept. But anyway,
turned things around completely.
Yeah, it did. Number 4 to number 2 in 2 years. That in a big thing like telecom, that's pretty hard to do.
And how did this is a country also of the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. Now here's Ted, smarty pants, turns up from America, right, and starts changing things around here, and he's making us look bad. And, I'm not sure if I'm like this. So did you find the elbows sort of came out a bit and your colleagues weren't so particularly supportive, or it wasn't like that?
Actually, I got promoted too soon to find out. So I got
promoted. You just jumped right over the bodies and got the
No. I got promoted to the U.S.
Oh,
so AirTouch was
okay.
And I was Chief Marketing Officer of the U.S.,
okay.
which was our main operation.
Okay, so they're all getting out the knives ready to fix up Ted, and he's on the plane. He's gone.
But I came back to Japan.
But that is an issue, though, isn't it, about jealousy?
Yes.
People who stick out but actually succeed. That's very embarrassing. Make other people look bad. That there is a lot of that in the corporate world, isn't there?
There is, unfortunately.
So where's that wah piece, that harmony piece goes missing sometimes a little bit.
Yeah, and I think you can disrupt the wah just by trying harder and doing stuff, unfortunately. But the way you do that, of course, is you acknowledge your team, and of course, it's not a one-person effort. The team really did do great.
I'm sure there are probably some people thinking, hey, listen, that Ted guy, I should be doing that job, not him. I should be the bucho, not that guy. I've been here longer, I'm Japanese, or whatever they think.
I don't think at that point no one wanted that job.
No one wanted the job.
Because it was doing so poorly.
At the initial stages.
At the initial stage, but once
kryptonite.
It was working out, once they got it back, then they wanted to take it back.
Okay, you made it attractive.
Right, made it attractive, So...
So how long did you go back to the States for?
That was for 4 years. It was 2 years so we merged and we became Verizon. So I was Chief Marketing Officer for AirTouch and then US West when we merged, but then we merged again. And so it was one of these restructuring things, and I was like, well, I don't know. I did the restructuring stuff, and I had a great opportunity. It was around 1999, the internet was just coming out. So I said, I'm going to take my chances with a startup at the time.
Really?
And,
in the States?
In the States. And I did that for a couple of years. I sold out to my partners. But basically, Vodaphone wanted me back after they took over Japan Telecom. And so that's when I was managing a few hundred people in the States. But then when I came over, after managing a group, the Keiki, which is the head of corporate planning, then they said, okay, there's a corporate business unit, 2,000 people. Ted, why don't you go and take charge of that?
So 12 people originally.
Yeah.
500, 2,000, just a small leap.
Yeah, just leaping up a bit.
So how did you make that transition from 500 to 2,000? And 500 in America, multicultural society.
300. It wasn't
300. Okay, so 300, multicultural society. Everyone speaks English. We're all on the same page here. 2,000, boom, you're back in Japan. That must have been making some changes there for you to step up to that.
I think, leadership to me, it's the same basic fundamentals, but the difference is symbolic leadership becomes a lot more important. So that I later on I was head of private equity for Fidelity Asia, and actually the story goes around, and it's a good story, so I'll say this, although it's private, but it's Fidelity, Ned Johnson, one of the wealthiest men in the world. He's very wealthy. It's a private company, right? He stays at the Okra Hotel, which is not a, I'm thinking, I'm wondering if this is okay to say this, but
it's a wonderful hotel, but it's probably not the most expensive hotel.
It's not the most. It's a nice hotel, but and it's
right next to the American Embassy.
And you can see him staying from the '60s all the way, and then in the '60s is probably. Yeah. And anyway, so this is the actual thing about leadership is that on one of his trips, he pulls out a coupon for dry cleaning, a 500 yen coupon, to get a 500 yen discount off of this, and people were just amazed. But the lesson is the symbolic part of large enterprise thing. That spoke more than any big policy or any speech about what you should do. Is that he's actually showing how he actually treats his own money. So I thought that was great example of leadership in action. But anyway,
flew in on his private jet, I suppose, did he?
No. He's actually a very humble man.
Is
he's
he?
very
Okay.
He's a great man. So I think symbolic leadership means a lot more. The other thing for me was, remember I was telling you about that middle that always gets in the way? Well, was my chance to actually do something. We had I think 85 bucho that reported to me.
This is in Vodaphone.
Yeah, this is in Japan Telecom.
Yeah, this is Japan Telecom. Sorry, 85.
And then I said, this is crazy because there's one bucho with two guys, and one bucho with all this kind of craziness. And we just said, well, if you wanted to lay out a rational organization, what would that be? And we showed that, and then we tried to put the people by the boxes, and then we needed about 30 people at the bucho level, and so we did that.
There must have been 45 very unhappy people who didn't become bucho.
Well, one thing you learn after doing these things a bit is one of the guys that came back and he was like a bucho I let go, and he was like he wanted to see me after a few years. And I'm like, oh, okay, and I met him, and he's like, Ted, thank you so much, because as a result, I was so unhappy in my bucho job. Now I'm a professor at a university. I was liberated from that. So you have to think about the restructuring works on both sides. So. But of course, there are a lot of tough stories, and we try to help them out. But I do believe that what's not right for some people, just because you're not right in this organization, doesn't mean there's another organization that could.
Well, that's true too, isn't it? I mean, the culture, the direction, communication levels, trust. There's a whole bunch of things that in the mix. And sometimes sometimes you've been through this too, where the company you're very happy, then it merges, or you're very happy, and then your boss changes.
That's right.
Or the president of the company changes, in some foreign land, and then that trickles down, and suddenly your life's hell. So it's hard to have that continuous joy of work in big organizations because so many factors can change your reality. But coming back to your leading, so you rationally had 2,000, I think you said, people, and you had truckloads of buchos. You rationalize all that, and what happens after that?
So after that, the next thing you have to do is instill a few set of metrics that really make a difference. And for us, it was enterprise sales. And so basically I said the Japanese word is juchu. So juchu means new orders. So everybody, they'd always be talking about staff things and everything. I said, juchu, what's your juchu? What's your juchu? And I think in larger organizations, you have to repeat things so often that they seem like, oh my God, I'm talking about this yet again, right? But if you keep doing the same consistent thing.
Is that particular to Japan, though? Don't you think for, leaders, we suffer from this, hey, I told them. We had the meeting, I told everybody, they've got it, now get to work, as opposed to, well, did they get it? And maybe...
you heard the funnel, right?
Yeah.
I spoke to it. Did they get it? Do they understand it? They have the tools, right? The funnel. And then by the time something happens, so the way to do it is just keep reinforcing that and make sure that...
I find, in any sort of leadership position, you have to keep repeating.
Yes.
Things that you think is like a broken record. Well, I got to tell them again, but you got to tell them again.
Because they might not have caught it, or there's a different context.
I don't think that's a Japan thing particularly.
I don't think it is either. I think there's just a consistency. When you got a bigger ship, you just got to keep saying, we're still going straight. Yep.
So what happens after that? Would you change companies? Do you go somewhere else?
So Japan Telecom, right after that, let's see. Right after that, I went to a company called Picsel, which was a world leader in smartphones. They actually had the smartphone patents. The original pinch and zoom was their patent.
Was it?
Yeah, it was bought by Samsung later. But I went to that for a few years, and then private.
Yeah, private equity was
private equity with Fidelity.
Yeah. What made you jump out of the sort of the day-to-day business of that telecommunications business into private equity? It's quite a different world.
Yeah, that's.
Or did they drop some big dollar signs in front of your eyes? Ted, come over here.
No, it's something that I kind of. Well, I'll say it now. I'll tell the story, but then I might edit this.
You choose. You get to choose, Ted. This
okay.
Everything you say here is editable, and if you don't like it, we just cut it out.
Well,
so if you want to leave it in, you can leave it in, or share the secret. It's up to you.
So Japan Telecom, I was the corporate head, right? Headquarter head, and I looked at the book value according to what Vodafone put it on the books for. It was $40 million. We had $2 billion of assets. So I was like,
but that's typical in Japan, isn't it? I mean, that's not an unusual thing. But the Japanese are always understating the value of the company based on
$40 million versus $2 billion.
Well, that's a big one, but they still have this problem. I mean, recently, what was that case that came up where these activist investors are coming in and trying to get the actual value to reflect the company's worth as opposed to the book value is really, really low. Yeah. Maybe that's an extreme case.
That's extreme. So, and then that
but
was
it's a Japanese accounting approach, though, isn't it?
And then I talked to my friend who was he eventually became CEO of Bank of America Merrill Lynch, but he was running debt at the time, and he said, "Oh, I could lend you $1 billion to your name, Ted, because it's clean assets, and we lend against telecom assets." I was like, "Wow, okay, maybe I just need some equity, and I could do a management buyout of the company." And I actually had the other management on board on this, and they agreed. And then the investment bankers came in and they said, "Well, Ted, if you're really going to do this, then you got to step aside because it's a conflict of interest and you're on the board right now."
Right.
And so, so do you want to have this nice paying job and do this? And I enjoyed the job, or do you want to take the risk of doing a management buyout? Now it turns out that Ripplewood came in and they bought it for $1.2 billion and they sold it 6 months later for $1.8 billion.
Right.
And they put in maybe $50, $100 million of equity. So if you think about the return on investment, so this is kind of what put in my head of like, I have to think about this other side of private equity for a bit. But interesting story. But
interesting. Well, I mean, you know, but this is part of your career development, isn't it, in terms of seeing the perspective.
But what I learned, everybody has their own sort of rhythm. And private equity and investment, I mean, it's very good, and no knock to anybody who's in it, but it's just a different pace than when I like to be in the seat, making the decisions, going out, trying, and that's just my lot in life, I suppose, right? So the ultimate example of that is, for me, is running your own company, as you know, Greg, right? If you don't go and do something, nothing's going to happen.
Nothing's going to happen,
right? And you gotta build the team from scratch. You got to do that, build a brand, everything. And so I think that.
So where did you get to Kenja from private equity? Did you go private equity Kenja, or did you go something in between?
Oh, so you know what? I just realized. So private equity came first, and then I went to Picsel.
That's, okay. Equity so then Picsel. Okay, we reversed that. That doesn't matter.
This is a number here. Yeah,
that's okay. It doesn't matter.
So anyway, so Picsel, software company. And I knew some good technology guys, and they're like, "Okay, maybe we can start something up." And I was just brainstorming about some stuff, and then it's kind of like a marriage or something. You know, when you make a proposal, you don't know until one day it feels right, and you just do it. And so that one day for me was when we did the user interface for this product called Kenja Rooms, and when we made that, I was like, "Wow!" I couldn't stop. I couldn't sleep.
It got you.
Yeah, almost 2 days. I was just like, it got me, and I just had to do something about it. So, I mean, it's very
so it's 11 years now with Kenja, right?
Yeah, that's
since
right.
you found it, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, the topic of this podcast is around leading in Japan. So let's sort of reflect on your experiences leading in Japan, and what have you found across the different companies you've been in and different organizations and industries you've been in? What's worked well that you've found for getting people engaged in their work?
I think engagement really is one of the things is interest.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to figure out what truly interests people.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Well, how do you figure that out?
You ask.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't ask for the fear of, well, they're in accounting. What if they say they're interested in marketing, right?
Mm.
But you ask people because whether they say so or not, they're still going to have it in their heart. So one thing I think
are they likely to? Well, the question there is, they likely to share with you what they're really thinking? We talked before about tate mai and hone, and you turn up, you're the boss. I mean, there's got to be...
Greg, you know the secret, and most listeners know too, right? When you do Japanese, you got to take them out for a drink.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It helps enormously. It's not a cliche. It really actually works. But it's not just the drink. It's really trying to get enough so that you understand what people are about. So I think one is just aligning what they're interested in. That's one thing. The other thing is I think you have to have a balance between giving them enough rope and then not giving enough too much rope so that they can hang themselves too, right? I have a kind of interesting thing in Kenja where we have a lot of young people. And some of the young people are very ambitious and very capable. But then unfortunately, there's a thing that you don't know what you don't know. So they'll think they know what they need, but they're not seeing other things that they don't.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. So, Ted, are we talking about that age-old problem when we're trying to put the old head on the young shoulders here, like I find with my son?
Yes. Well,
Dad's advice is like, not needed. I know everything.
And it's a Gen Z thing, too.
Son, mate, I've been on this planet a lot longer than you. You should listen to that. No, Dad, you're old and out of date. I know what's happening. So there's always that issue, isn't there?
There is. And I think... the happy intermediary would be if they would lead, but then just consult and get some advice. But what I find, unfortunately, is that some of the people don't actually know how to take that advice. They don't actually run and say, well, I've been there before, so what about this, and this? And I love when they say, no, not these two things, but that third and fourth one, that's great. But they don't, a lot of times when the Gen Z, I think, is more like, no, I'm fine. I've got it. Don't
worry, Ted. I've got it.
And those things, those nuggets. So I find it's a shame because I think they could learn more. And I remember at our age, when we were that age, Greg, right? Like, okay, remember the old man saying X, like we'd write it down and
exactly.
Yeah, and you try to learn from those mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have that secret of what exactly it is. If I did. I mean, if somebody else has that, but I can tell you it's just more of a journey, and I think what we need to do is, I think part of it is making sure that at least we're no longer a startup because I guess we're 35, 40 people.
Startup, right?
I mean, but we act like one in a good way.
Okay.
And in a good way is like. As an example, a few years ago, we're basically on a content customized platform, and then we're like, oh, blockchain would be a perfect thing to add to it because now we can certify that all the content here is certified on blockchain, that everything, Greg uploaded this, Ted approved it or whatever, that's all on a blockchain now. We did that, And then it started making some movement. And then, everybody was taken by AI like a year ago, 6 months ago. And about 6 months ago, we started investigating. And just a few months ago, we came out with an AI product, which is actually really changing the face of things. But basically, the startup mentality is like, if there's a trend, that's our one advantage, is that we can move quickly. Agile. So we will go and we'll jump on that opportunity. And people will always say, well, can't Microsoft do that? And I know what it's like to work in a company of that size. And yes, they could.
Yeah.
But then you'll need a division head here and a division head here. Lots of working level people to go up and down the whole thing and make it work.
And for them, I mean, they're changing at scale. So when they contemplate that type of change,
it's massive.
Squillions of dollars, masses of people, a huge energy and time, and it's not going somewhere else.
As it should be,
right? Prioritization element here. Right. So for them, it's not something they're going to change lightly. Exactly. We'll just jump into that,
right?
Because it's organizational, isn't it?
That's right.
What about in terms of getting ideas from people? Like you talk about Generation Z there before, or Generation Z, as we say in Australia.
Sure.
What do you do about getting ideas? Because sometimes, as the boss, because we have a lot of information, we have a lot of experience, we're a little bit older, been around the block a few times, not our first rodeo, and we tend to have a lot of ideas. Not when you're the owner of the business, you're very passionate about it, and you think about it all the time.
Yeah.
So it can be that we just dominate the idea funnel, and just all our ideas go in there. But what have you found works well to get ideas from the team?
Yeah. So I think one of the things is just to break it out into different areas. So in Kenja, we have a lot of different use cases. So what I do is I have one different junior person in charge of each of the use cases. So you got your own thing, go and do that. And
so when you say use cases, you're talking about some experimental aspect of the business?
So for example, so Kenja, it's a platform that also has AI embedded in it now. So just like GPT, it can be used like that, except GPT is only based on training on the internet. And we have local corpus, meaning that we train only in your data. And if it doesn't know the answer, we'll say, I don't know.
Unlike
GPT, will
lies to you,
hallucinates and lies to you, right? And so we have a pretty big advantage right now. And so you can think of use cases in recruiting, like auto building of resumes, or in private equity for doing a due diligence of their of targets. In logistics, it's for customs forms, right? Automating the filling in of those forms, right? So if you're able to say, okay, here's 15 documents on how to write a resume, and here's a resume, we can say, okay, make Greg's resume to be a CEO, make Greg's resume to be a board advisor, right? We can have AI do all that. So
fabulous.
Yeah, so that's a use case. Those are all use cases. Okay. And what I'm saying is that there's a core technology and there's an overall strategy, which we're still doing, but each person gets to run their own show, like recruiting is their own little mini business.
So they get to come up with their own ideas about the application and the direction they're going to take this use case. Right?
Yeah, that's the idea. It's still, and they're still getting along right now. And the secret, I think, is just to get it going well enough so that then I can take a step back and then it rolls on its own.
Well, how on that point, how about taking that step back? Because, the classic is with owners of companies that at some point the organization gets a certain scale and size and they think, well, I'll step back and have somebody else in there and I'll be the visionary and I'll be directing it and this person will be the sort of doing the day-to-day. And it lasts about 6 months and they just take the whole thing back because they're frustrated or they don't like the direction or they
That's a great point, Greg.
They want to be the one in charge. So how do you step out?
So the problem, I think, is that there's a couple of different approaches. One is that there will be an alter ego Ted, somebody else that's more senior that can take over for me. But and that's the way a lot of these other businesses will go. For me, I don't think that it's going to go that way. What I think it's going to be instead is there are responsibilities and processes that we're building. So there's a business development team. And remember I was saying these boxes you got to build. So there's a box for, and right now I'm wearing 15 hats. You're wearing, 15 hats too, right? You know how that goes, right? But as you put the whole responsibilities there, even though your name is in multiple spots, and then eventually pull back and there is a process there, not just I've got an alter ego Ted, but there is now a head of BD, or there's a head of this department, right? And actually, we've been doing that. My leadership team now, we have a head of marketing, a head of technology, investments. We have administration, HR. So there are people that I'm bringing in that actually can take that functional lead.
And the beauty of that is it frees up the cult of the personality of someone having to be a certain type of person to do a certain type of functional role. In fact, what you've got is, here's a structure, here's a playbook on the role, and here's what you've got to do. So, it becomes scalable, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's the whole point, is getting to a scalable model. And that's what the use case is too, right? Is the use case,
and if you ever want to exit, they're not buying the company with Ted's no longer there. Ted's got to be out.
Yeah.
There's good things got to run without Ted, but if everything relies on Ted, you can never sell the business.
That's right. Well,
and you'll be working to 120.
Well, the interesting thing is that I have some friends who retired when they were 40.
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
It's a little bit early, isn't it?
I could have retired pretty early too if I wanted to.
Right.
Yeah. But I'll say this is that I think it just depends on the person. For me, the way I'm structured, I couldn't take that.
40 is a bit too young.
No, even.
What do you do with yourself?
No, I really enjoy, if you're on the cutting edge of. Sometimes it's great when you're thinking about these things, and I'm just like, what else would I rather be doing? I wouldn't want to. I don't know. I see like a trend in YouTubers is there's guys who do pretty good in business, and then they want to do a YouTube thing on how to improve their life or something, and like. I like business, so I don't want to do something else.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
I'm find the joy in the work. Yeah.
I do really enjoy it. So I think for me that retirement thing is less. I mean, I don't know. I don't see that as part of of where I am at least at this stage. Yeah.
About building trust, you've got different generations in the company. You mentioned before use case, they got an opportunity to come up with ideas and experiment and do stuff, right? So it gives them freedom. But in terms of building trust, now you started 11 years ago, and probably you were employee number 1, I guess, and then you got to find employee number 2, 3, 4, etc. Right. And as you and I both know, marquee name brand companies are preferred for Japanese staff to work at, and the bigger and the bolder, the better. And the wife's happy, or the husband's happy, and the parents are happy, and the grandparents are happy. And someone turns up to work for Kenja, which, what the hell does that even mean? Kenja, what is that? And never heard of it, and who's this Ted character, are you going to work for this foreigner? Yeah. How do you get people to join? So there's a whole issue of trust, of getting people to give up something that they understand, tried and true, possibly got a brand, happy in the family that you work there, to come and work for you guys. Well, how did you get that to happen? There was a trust element there.
Well, I think one thing that is that we do is that as a professor, that's how I have trust. Is that we are actually the number 1 employer at my MBA school at UCD.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I hire valedictorians. We've hired 4 of them. So very, very good people that we've hired from the school. Now, there is a it's kind of a dilemma for foreigners in Japan, is that there are, of course, you need the Japanese-speaking staff. But if you think about it, there's a lot of other work that needs to be done. It could be done in English, and then the customer-facing people will have to speak Japanese, right? So I think that there's a lot of talent in Japan of people who don't speak Japanese that well.
Don't speak Japanese well. They're English speakers, don't speak Japanese well, but they can still work here.
Yeah, they can still work
Which
here.
is a bit counterintuitive, because normally you think, if you don't really have high-level Japanese, who needs you?
Right.
You can speak English, so what? Plenty of Japanese speak English. Why do we need you? So what you're saying, though, is there are these pockets of opportunity.
Yeah.
So they don't need to have high-level Japanese, but they've got a capacity to work inside organizations.
That's right. I don't think it's scalable to thousands of people, or maybe even hundreds. But if you're a smaller organization, picking up a dozen people that way is quite possible.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's one thing about establishing the trust with people.
Right.
Is that And then the other thing is like you don't have to be a professor to do that. If you go and speak to people, we're a sponsor of JMAC, you know, different things like that. You
So
get
which
involved
uni?
with
Which
the
uni are
community.
you teaching at?
NUCB.
NUCB.
Yeah. It's actually the
What's
number one.
NUCB? What is that?
It stands for Nagoya University of Commerce and Business.
Nagoya University of Commerce and Business.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, number one according to the FT.
There you go.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And you're on the Nozomi on a regular basis down to Nagoya.
Not on a super regular basis, but yeah, it's about it's a few classes a year. So I on weekends. So this is the thing is it's not really work if you enjoy what you do, right? So I will go full day of work, full week of work. CEO, president. You're just doing 100 things in a week. On Friday night, I'll go to Nagoya, and then I'll stay there Saturday, Sunday, and you would think like, oh my God, I'm like exhausted. Actually, I have more energy coming out of the weekend.
So you're having your squid and your beer on the Shinkansen back to Tokyo after hard weekend teaching at the college.
But I do take a
course.
morning off.
Oh, you do?
Monday mornings I'll take off.
Slacker, Ted, what's wrong with you?
Yeah,
Morning
but
off
slacker,
Monday.
right?
Slacker.
But if it's something you really enjoy, and you know how it is, right? A good.
I find teaching enjoyable. You know,
And
there's
training
something about giving back. There's something about the stimulation.
Yeah.
There's something about the joy of watching people grow and helping them to take their career to maybe a higher level than otherwise. Right. There's a lot of pleasure in that.
And you have that in the training, right?
We do,
as well,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So
one of our favorite courses here is high impact presentations, because the main modules are completed in just 2 days back to back, whereas some of the courses take 7 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks.
Right.
It's like a long time before you see the result. This one, 2 days, bang. They come in here, they go out there, and as an instructor, that's magnificent. That's wow, bingo. I saw them at this point. They go at that point. I feel like I've done a good job here. Very rewarding, very rewarding.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what else do you do about building trust?
I think the other thing is just it's your actions and how you interact day to day. And so I think one of the good ways is through one-on-ones, which I have to say is always something I need to remind myself even today, that if you don't do them, then you'll start to feel the cost of not doing that.
What's the cost?
The cost is is the trust.
Okay.
Right. If you're not there for your people enough. And this is one of the issues, I think, of not having, right now I'm doing the business development.
How many people in Kenja now?
About 35 or so.
It's quite big. And having one-on-ones with 35 people is impressive.
No. But we're organized in teams. And so
I'm just saying that you've got your direct reports.
But my direct reports is the management, which is 5, and then there's about 7 people in business development. So
it's sort of manageable.
Ish,
sort of.
And so I think that's important.
What I used to hate was having days of just constant meetings.
Yeah,
just used to drive me bonkers. Like
in the corporate world. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're just rolling through meetings. You think, what the hell am I, a professional meeting attendee? What the hell is this?
Right, and then when you're done with
work done,
and then when you get out of the meeting, you do the emails.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly,
and then your day's done.
You do. Like
meetings
tomorrow,
emails,
here we go again, So there's a sort of lunacy around that, isn't there?
Yeah. So I think meetings are still good, at least on a weekly basis with your team, because that promotes, because otherwise if you don't do that, I'm out of the loop. And no, you're not out of the loop. You just, you just got to make sure that everyone's on the same thing. The other thing I'm trying to do, especially with the younger team that I have, is that I want them to learn from each other. So I think the use cases are all similar. So I try to kind of do training live for somebody, like, okay, we're going to go through how you're going to prepare for your presentation. And I go into the details. Everyone else is listening. You'd think on one hand, well, it's not a waste of time because it's just between the two of them. But I know that they don't know how to do a lot of the things. So it's kind of a way to live bring them up to that next level.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so I think it's, you need different things for each critical stage of development. I had a great leader in my leadership class, actually. His name is Mel Sadamaru. He's the chairman of YKK, the zipper company. And I was really inspired because it's basically a commodity, and they've stayed number one for 89 years. Forever. You got YKK on you right now. You don't even know, right? You do, right?
Yeah.
And so, so he was talking about reinventing the company.
Yeah.
So So they had to go Nike.
Is there a Professor Katagi's case study here from this Zipper rebooting?
Yeah,
of
no,
the,
I think he could very well
write
be
a case on
study.
that, Professor.
I used to teach this seminar on case writing, and so that would be a really good one. But but I think the great thing in leadership is that, and this is what I mentioned to others, I'm sure you'd say the same thing, is that the leadership style has to be your own.
Yeah.
And so what you can do is you model, like, oh gosh, Greg's really smart in these areas. I can learn these kind of things. And Ted, I picked up a couple of things. I'll learn that. But you bring it into how you are, not like copycat something else, right? So and then that class, because this is about leadership, is the 5 principles. Is one is you first model the way. That's what I was saying, is that you don't tell people, is the whole Ned Johnson story, right? You don't tell people to save money. You actually show them you are saving money. That's better than anything else. You don't tell them work hard, you work hard, right? The second thing is inspire the vision. So, the whole thing of like, are you building a wall or are you building a cathedral? Right? The third thing is challenge the process. So it's kind of like what the process in Japan usually is, that huge permafrost of people who just don't want to change. And so you got to figure out a
permafrost of people who don't want to change. I love that, Ted.
Yeah,
that's a great expression.
That layer, right?
I love that.
Right? You can see it under.
I'm going to keep that in my mind. The permafrost of people who do not want to change.
Right? Yeah. But then there's just this level.
And I add to that too, that often in middle management, I hadn't thought of permafrost, but I often think of you have a sponge.
For you middle managers out there, I'm not trying to take cuts at all of you, right?
Yeah, you get the.
But don't be part of the permafrost.
You get the sponge on the top, and you get the concrete block underneath. The middle managers, right? So they're sucking up and absorbing everything from above,
right?
But they're not passing it down, and so the top management thinks the messages are going all the way to the bottom. Right. But this permafrost group here absorbing but not sharing.
Right.
And the why, it doesn't get transferred to the very base, and so the why gets sort of stuck in the upper echelons, but people at the bottom don't understand the vision, the strategy, why we're doing this, the nuances. It's all lost because of that group. I love that permafrost. That's a great
permafrost, right? So challenge the process was the third one, and you do that by also setting up small POCs, getting that done. So when we go into a company and do AI with a capital AI, that won't work. So what we say is we'll start out with, if you got a few million yen, we'll start out an AI project, not a few $1 million, a few million yen. We'll go out and we'll do a POC for you. We'll
get a POC?
Proof of concept.
Proof of concept. Okay.
I've been in the industry too long, right?
That's okay. I knew. Well, actually, just checking.
So the proof of concept to make sure it works, because the AI is hallucinating and all that, and you want to make sure it does that. Exactly. Right? So so that's the way we get things done. The fourth is enable others to act. So this is what we were saying, is that you build that trust, you get other people to do the stuff on their own. So I don't want to be managing every use case. They're going to manage their own use case, right? And the final one is encourage the heart. So those are the 5 principles. And I like that framework because everything, what I learned at Harvard just sucked. I just like, what is this? It's like, it's supposed to be one of the best schools for general management, and I didn't like the framework. And so
what didn't you like about the framework?
Well, I remember one of the cases was about a guy, executive, who was always in meetings, and we're like, what? Because we hadn't, think about it, we're all 20-somethings, and we're like, what is this guy? What's he doing managing this? It just seems like he's just in meetings all day. What is he doing, right? This
dozy guy.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember the actual framework, but it didn't
click.
It didn't click. It didn't. And the thing I like about that framework is that you can use it on a scale for 1,000 people or 10 people, or just even managing yourself even, right? So anyway, that framework is what I generally use. And as leaders, we're people. So you just try. You try to keep these frameworks in place, and you try to do it as best you can. But I think the other rule is you just keep thinking about the context, and the rules that applied in another situation may not apply here, right? So, yeah.
So, did we actually get an answer on how you convince people to quit their nice, secure job in their current company and take the risk of joining this startup? I mean, did we actually get an answer on that? I was thinking back.
Well, no, the answer was partially, remember I was saying, is that I'm going after younger people.
Right, okay.
Right? So I think it's a demographic game.
So you're looking at people who are possibly more flexible about their career opportunities.
So the one demographic, because we were talking about the Gen Z before, is that one of the guys that was a very good employee is he came from a top line Japanese company, and those people are quitting at amazing rates.
Are they?
Yeah. What he said in his own company, and I'd love to hear more data if people have it, but he's been about 4 years out, and 80% of the people in his class have left.
Wow.
90%.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So
that's a lot. Where are they going?
So if there are people listening to this, and you're one of those people who've been a few years out, and you're looking for
open.
Yeah, we're open and
talent.
we're looking for talent.
Open to talent.
Are.
Very good.
Yeah. So I think there's a group of people in their 20s looking for meaning and looking for something to do, and AI, if you're in a thing that, but everybody, so one of the ways we recruit is we have, good technology, we have a good set of people. So I think if you think about it, it's kind of like the Amazon thing, you know, how you try to hire somebody who's better than the mean. We're not quite doing that because a lot of the people we're hiring are young, but we're trying to, we started with a really great basis of people. Like I said, the valedictorian doesn't guarantee success in business, but it does show that they have a certain type of willpower and get stuff done, and they are smart. So we have a good group of people to build on, and I think that's really important to get those people so that they latch on, right?
So when you started the company 11 years ago, did you sit down and think, right, this is the type of culture I want in my company, and this is how I'm going to organize it. And I'm going to bring in people who are going to fit into this culture, but it's very clear on what the culture is going to be. Did you have that, or did the culture sort of grow organically as people arrived and the business started to, scale and started to go in different directions?
That's a great question. I as a professor, right, I'd say, start with the values, and I say that, but I didn't do that.
You didn't.
Well, because
the cobbler's children run barefoot.
Yeah, well,
really.
I think part of it is you realize the value really of doing it, and you really want to do it, but when you're talking about and this is where I was kind of self-talk, when I'm like 2 people, 5 people, it's like, what's the thing on values? I mean, I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. Let's go and let's do it.
Let's do it. There's a lot to do here. So
that's part of it. But what I think is I'm a better professor because I bring in my role as an executive. I'm a better executive because I bring in my role as a professor. My new thing.
You're more contemplative about things, maybe.
I'm much more like, okay, well, I don't teach anything that I don't believe in, and I use the stuff that I actually do. And so I'm just kind of going back and forth. And that's why I do like this sort of second hat, even though it does wipe out a lot of my weekends, right? But it is really interesting to think about this and just think about how to do it better, right? But okay, so the values. So we started doing that much more aggressively, I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago, and our growth rate, obviously when you've been in business that long, there's kind of zigzags a bit. We had a zigzag, and one of the zigzags I would say for people who are thinking about starting your own company is stick with your original vision. Stick with the vision, and if you're an investor, stick with the vision of the founder, because we went on a different vision according to a different set of principles, and then that didn't work, so we had to 3 years later, we came back to the original vision.
Really?
And that worked.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. So,
what made you deviate from the path?
Well, when you got investors, you want to keep the investors happy, and the investors wanted to go a different way. So, I do really believe that is if you're going to start a company, you got to believe in it as the customer yourself. You have to go and stick to your roots and make that happen. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time. I remember Bill Gross, the head of Idea Lab in the U.S., really successful entrepreneur. He said he looked at all his companies and the failure was that they predicted the right idea. It was just too early. Oh. And so this is my one, I guess, excuse as to like why we're still. I feel like right now we built a secure data container. That's exactly what AI needs now. So, like, okay, well, we've been perfecting this for 11 years, and now AI comes along, and we're able to ride that wave. Had we gone and jumped on it right now, we wouldn't have had all that experience, all the logos and. All
Is this
that.
a case of you lucked in there and it was a nice timing? You know,
I think
luck is important.
Serendipity,
in life, isn't it?
Well, but here's the difference. If you said it that way, just like, oh, I'm just getting lucky.
Yeah, take God lucky.
Yeah, take it lucky.
Yeah, but that 11 years was the lead up, right?
Well, that's part of it. Yeah. And the other thing I'd say is that luck only happens when you see the opportunity to do something about it. There's a lot of people that say, oh, yeah, AI, okay, well, I guess we'll get to it next year. And we didn't do that. We're like, jumped right on it. Right? So I think luck
opinions
goes,
are exciting but cheap, you know.
Yeah, but what's the saying is luck goes to the prepared.
Yes, that's
right?
true.
So you got to be prepared and ready for that window of opportunity and agile enough to jump on it. Right?
So Ted, if someone rang you up and said, "Hey Ted, I've been given this job. I've got to come to Japan and run the company there, and how could I be an effective leader? Give me some advice, Ted. Well, I don't know Japan. I don't speak Japanese. I'm going to be here."
Yeah, so I think part of it is understanding the Japanese culture.
How am I going to do that?
Well, I told you those four, the five, 4 plus 1.
There's an excellent book on that subject here somewhere.
Is there? Okay.
I'll find it over here.
All right.
Yeah, Japan Business Mastery for those future CEOs in Japan. Read that book.
Okay.
That'll help you.
Well, that's one of the things you got to do. The other thing is actually I do teach the undergrads this global mindset. Right. Okay. And the global mindset, actually, I call it my HITS model. It's you think about who are the best globally minded people in the world. Demographic. You know what it is? No. It's 4-year-old kids.
Okay.
Because if you're going to playground, all the parents are like all stressed out. Like, I don't know, there's these people from another culture. I can't speak the language. But the kids, they're just having at it. They're playing and they're making friends and they're getting at it, right? They're resilient.
Interesting.
They're open-minded. But the key is, on the heart, they treat a person like a person. It's not some adversary, some Japanese person I have to understand everything about. It's just a person.
No baggage.
They're people. So people are people. That's the first thing. And you know, there are people who succeed in Japan and they don't know a lick of culture or a lick of the thing, but they are really good at understanding people, right? We've seen this time and time again, right? Yeah. So the heart is the most important thing. The next thing I say is intuition. So intuition is being able to understand what's out there and being able to say, oh, okay, I get Greg's culturally Australian. Okay, I understand his background, his history, understand how he thinks, right? So there's the intuition, I call it global intuition, understanding the other. And then the other thing that breaks through every culture is thinking, rational. So that's how I did it in the beginning. I was very good at presenting, well, this is ROI. I had to explain what ROI is back then. This is how you calculate it. It's all logical. This is why it makes sense. So that's the way to cunning. But the final one is the most important one, the S. You know what it is. I'm sure there's probably a book on this somewhere.
There will be.
It's a story.
Storytelling. Yeah.
That's your name. That's your name. That's your name. That's your name. It's in your name.
Right there. Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, but so having your own story, and so and being able to just say this is who I am, to open up and share who you really are. So I gave this class to some junior high school students from Tohoku. This is many years back when they got the big earthquake. And they sent a bunch of kids out to a global competition in Ireland. And there was this little girl, didn't speak almost any English. And she comes up with her story and she says, my father has a big smile. My mother has a bigger smile. But I had the biggest smile. And just this little girl, and she just melted the whole room with her huge smile. You could see it. I don't have that smile, but she had that smile. So she goes, and there's like 150 students and 10 students from Japan, 150, 200 students from all around the world. She wins the whole darn the Global Ambassador Award.
Well done. Well done. Awesome.
So I can't say it's because of her thing, but I'm just saying, if you have that HITS, so I think that is one thing if you're coming over, because the Japanese culture is quite, like, as compared to other cultures, like when I moved to the UK, it's pretty different, but it's still within some of the rationales. It operates by a lot of the same rules, right? But so you have to have that sort of understanding, but then also the kind of this HITS thing. It's like the heart, just thinking about people as people. And then other than that, I mean, there's a lot of, I think, Japanese are very sincere, hardworking. Although, of course, you'll have your issues with any people in any culture, but there's a lot of advantages. But you have to kind of swim with advantages, and then the biggest disadvantage of learning how to think about the change. And we talked about some secrets on that too. But you got to figure out how to get that change to happen while also taking advantage of the good things in Japan.
So if you're going to give a definition of leadership, now I'm talking to the professor here, so this should be just easy for you.
What was the
easy for you? But what's your definition of leadership, Ted?
Definition of leadership is, I think it's the people who inspire others to take action on the priority ahead of us.
Inspire others to take action on the priority. I like that.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, and doing it through. I do believe in those 5 principles, right? Is model the way, inspire a vision, challenge the process, enable others to act, and then encourage the heart. Right?
It's a great place to pull it up there, Ted. We could go on for a lot
I
more
enjoyed it,
time on
Greg.
this. I can see this easily.
Yeah,
but we'll put
and you said conversational, very good.
Put a stake in the
Felt
road
like
here, but thank you. I enjoyed it today.
And it is a discussion with a friend. So
it is too.
And that's thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Ted. And please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.